Hi, Christian.
Hey, hi, Allyson. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Can you hear me
Hi,
okay?
I can hear you great. How about me? Am I good?
Yes. Yep, you're coming in great.
Great, great. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing well. It's kind of a fall, gloomy day here in Arlington, but it's nice. Ready
It
for
is.
fall.
Yes, and for those of you listening, Allison and I are sort of neighbors. We live in the Virginia area, and it's been quite gloomy here recently and humid, although not as hot. And I kind of appreciate that a little bit. Even though I come from the tropical weather in Puerto Rico, the stuffiness here in these parts of the East Coast can be a little bit intense sometimes.
Absolutely. Humid,
Yeah,
very humid.
very humid. Yeah. So, Allison, thank you so much for being willing to do this. It's really an honor. And just to do a really quick introduction, sort of on the informal side. So I understand that you're a writer and you're also a mother, right?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Okay. But I also know that you are a person with a very interesting and brilliant mind. As I had a chance to talk to you briefly a few months ago, and I was really intrigued by your thinking on chronic illness in your experience with chronic illness, and how that thinking has guided you along your way with recovery and how you've been sort of navigating these ups and downs. And although I am at the moment going to be very respectful in terms of, or cautious to call this CIRS, we had a conversation about this. We can talk about this during the chat. It nevertheless, you present an interesting scenario for thinking about chronic illness and CIRS, and how CIRS could potentially manifest itself in different ways, and how people may be able to get in and out of something that looks like CIRS. And we can have this conversation of whether, where do we draw the line of what CIRS is, and right, because there's all these different category illnesses that we sort of think about, and it certainly raises an interesting question on that front. So what I would like to do to start is, if you can talk a little bit about your experience with your chronic illness early on. And something that we're going to be hopefully talking about a lot here is, in the context of this, is the role of phospholipid treatment, which is something that Allyson has had a lot of experience with in her journey. So if you could talk a little bit about early on, what did your chronic illness look like before you even knew anything? And how do you go about seeking treatment? And then how do you come across this idea of phospholipid treatment and phosphatidylcholine and that stuff?
Absolutely. This is going to be a juicy conversation. I will try to be as succinct as I can be.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for having me, Christian. You do such wonderful work for all chronic illness community, and CIRS in particular. So thank you for having me. So yeah, just very briefly, so my journey began about 11 years ago. I was 6 months pregnant with my only daughter, who's well and thriving, thank goodness. Actually, what silver lining of going through a journey like this is knowing how to help your children, right? Help them become robust, and learn a lot about preventative medicine, which I think is almost equally as important as curing illness. They're related, same coin. So my symptoms initially presented as fibromyalgia, actually, and extreme bladder symptomology, pain, urgency, felt like also rheumatoid arthritis, felt like my hands were very stiff. I had a lot of neurological symptomology that I didn't actually recognize as neurological symptoms at first, with brain fog, and you just think, why is my head cloudy? But you don't typically associate that with neurological symptomology. So I went through about a 4-year journey of going through allopathic model of medicine. I think we all can relate to this, for those who've been on a chronic illness journey, of what's wrong with me. allopathic model, everything's very siloed. Like my bladder hurts, go to a urologist. I have fibromyalgia, I have RA, let me go to a neurologist. I have brain symptoms, let me go get an MRI. So going through all of those tests, tens of thousands of dollars later, resulted in no relief, tremendous amount of pharmaceutical drugs trying to chase the symptoms. And within the allopathic model, I think all of us have been there. Something hurts, you go to the doctor. So I was left with trying to seek out alternative forms of therapy. It began with sort of Chinese medicine that had some help to a degree. A lot of it was targeting liver, which actually is very related to a lot of what we're going to be talking about. And then later kind of stumbled upon a clean way of living, learning a lot about where our food comes from, what we should and shouldn't be, how we should be sourcing our food, toxic environment. And then that actually led me to a doctor here local to both Christian and I, looking at, and I went in and I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I've been through the run, I've been through everything. And he said, I want you to put your hands out for a second. And my hands were shaking because I had this symptomology. My balance was off, and he had me take this bizarre test, which was called a visual contrast sensitivity test, the VCS. And I failed it wonderfully. I completely failed it. And he said, I know what's wrong with you. You actually have you're having an environmental illness that's called CIRS, or CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And I thought, wow, I have a diagnosis. This is great. And that sort of began 4 months into looking at how my environment was affecting and creating symptoms. Again, you would never think that the bladder, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, neurological symptomology, and I also mentioned chronic fatigue. That was also something I had. So on that journey from him, a wonderful doctor here local to us in Virginia, learned very quickly that what I was exposed to, what I would breathe in my environment, could not only change my cells, down to the cells themselves, and my mitochondria, my body's ability to produce energy or not produce energy, and also physically change my brain. So we actually conducted a neuroquant, which I know Christian talked a lot about on here, and I was horrified to see that I had both edema and atrophy in different aspects of my brain at 30, I think I was 37, 38 years old at the time. Way too young to be having this kind of symptomology. Looking a lot like Parkinson's, sort of early Parkinson's, looking like someone who had post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of different parts of my brain had literally shifted. So from that, I began a really novel treatment program. We originally began with the Shoemaker protocol, which is pretty standard. If you have mold, we tested our environment. We did have a source of mold in our home. We actually did rely a lot. It was very thankful that we were able to remediate at a very reasonable cost. We did invest in wonderful air reactors that tremendously helped me as well. And then I was very cautious about environments and our cars, even our vehicles that I would enter into. But beyond all that, the question that I had all along, even though I was making some improvement, I wasn't making a tremendous recovery, right, with the cholerestamine, with treating Marcons. It was extraordinarily hard on my body. And I asked my doctor at the time, I said, something's missing. Like, we're still kind of targeting it as removal. But
Yeah.
Why did this happen in the first place, right?
Right.
So
I have a quick question. So were you able to pass the visual test with the cholestyramine treatment?
A little bit. It got better.
It got better. Okay.
Yeah. It actually, and that's the neat thing about my journey, is that it really began to take off with the introduction of something called phospholipid therapy. And this is something I think that a lot of folks I see on a lot of CIRS boards in particular say, well, I remediated my home and I took the cholerestamine and my VCS got a little better, but not fully better, or I don't feel well, or I am passing my VCS, but I don't feel good, right? Or my CIRSLab, my TGF-beta1 is still through the roof, my C4A is wonky, so what's wrong with me? And the doctor I treated with at the time introduced me and said, it's kind of a new, we call it kind of a second book of medicine, but there's this thing called cell danger response. And I think CIRS is sort of like that. I think that's what's going on. Again, this was in 2016. This is several years ago. We've made a lot of advances since then. And he said, there's also a wonderful doctor named Dr. Patricia Kane, and she wrote this beautiful book called The Detox Project back in the early 2000s. And her theory was that not only just CIRS, But everything wrong with the human body actually came down to the integrity of our cells. So our cell membrane, our mitochondria, and her son, I think, began with severe autism, nonverbal, couldn't speak, gastrointestinal issues. And it was actually a lot of the mold community at that time started looking at this going, why is it that you could take 4 people and one of those 4, you put them in the same moldy environment and the other 3 are going to be okay. You know, they might have a headache or feel a little odd. And the 4th person, or 25% of our population, crashes and burns and doesn't make a recovery. And I think you can ask a similar question now with COVID, right? Why do 4 people not have, and 3 of those 4 people totally fine, they have a mild sniffle, they go on with their life. The 4th person, 2 years later, they're still recovering from profound symptomology.
Right.
Why do some people have, cancer and other people don't? If you could expose them to the same lifestyle, 3 are fine, 4 may not be. So both him and Patricia Kane made this connection of saying there's something in common with all of these profiles of disease. And when they started looking at different samples, what we found was very early in the day was that everyone had extraordinarily low phosphatidylcholine, or total lipids, completely trashed essential fatty acid balancing between omega-3 and 6. And the other thing that now is coming out on the forefront is everyone has extremely low plasmalogen count. And I find that fascinating that you can pull up the same laboratory work for a child with ADHD or autism, and a person with long COVID, a person with stage 4 breast cancer, a person with CIRS, heavy metal toxicity, and there's a common denominator, but the manifestations in each patient are different. So this intrigued me. I have no background in biochemistry at all, but I learned along the way. I think we all do.
So this was shortly after you had started the Shoemaker protocol?
Yes.
When you started getting into this?
Absolutely. So originally the protocol began, I became very familiar with a company called BodyBio, who was wonderful. And we began on a phosphatidylcholine complex. So it's 4 different types of phospholipids, which are essential to restoring both the structural integrity of the cell, detoxing the cell, and replenishing so that you have that robustness to detoxify. So if you come from that, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I want to go touch into that because you mentioned when we talked that you did some testing with the company, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. It's my favorite test. I nerded up with this test. It's a phenomenal test. It's called the BodyBio Red Blood Cell Essential Fatty Acid Test. And there is no other test, and trust me, I've taken them all. It is profound. I cannot urge enough to have this test done or find a practitioner who does administer it. The test looks at your total lipid count, and that's probably one of the most important signifying factors. And you can see the degree of severity of the illness based on that one count. And they range, the ideal range should be between 25 and -25, that range on that test. And the average CIRS patient, since we're talking about CIRS, usually begins around -120, which is profoundly deficient. When you look at, I have a very dear friend who actually, we'll talk about her in a second, but actually beat metastasized stage 4 breast cancer by going on phospholipid therapy and a number of other ailments as well. Her BodyBio RBC EFA was -240. So what's amazing to me is, and then you take a placebo of someone who doesn't have any disease or symptomology, they're within that 25 and -25 range. They have the robustness of their cellular integrity that you can stick them, in a questionable toxic environment. And you're like, okay, I took a hit, but I have the robustness in order to defend myself. So the test is, besides the total lipid count, it also is the most superb, superior test for looking at essential fatty acid balance. So the other key part of this is we are exposed so much to rancid, toxic oils in our diet. The restaurant industry, and I understand it, we all want to find the best and easiest, most efficient way of making food taste good. So a lot of those seed oils are literally every oil that we consume, canola, avocado oil, cotton oil, peanut oil, they literally embed themselves, they stitch themselves at the signature in our cells. And if you are consuming toxic seed oils, it winds up making your beautiful grape cells like a raisin all shriveled up and not right. And the body cannot excrete the things that make us sick, and they cannot bring in things that keep us well. So the oils were a big deal. But if you take this test, you can see exactly what is stuck in your membrane of your cell. So I think that would be a phenomenal test to look at. What balance do I need to bring in terms of oils to heal my membrane? Yeah. What is the degree of phosphatidylcholine that I need? So that is really getting down to the most microscopic view of health. And if you subscribe to the theory, which I do, and have seen healing in my body, not once, but almost twice now, you are, as healthy as your cells are, right?
Yes, right. So if you wanted to do this test, what would be the best way to go about it? Would it be through your practitioner, or can you contact the company directly?
So it can go two ways. So there is a list of, if you go, we can maybe share this link, Christian, somehow. I think there's a list of body bio practitioners who've been trained by Dr. Patricia Kane that she recommends. It's actually quite an extensive training. So not everybody can go ahead and just administer it. They really need to understand how to read this test. So a website you can go online and find a practitioner in your area that specializes in it. It has been accredited by Patricia Kane. Kennedy Krieger is the name of the organization. If you are working with a practitioner who's open to that, who's not necessarily accredited, he or she or they can go ahead and reach out through Kennedy Krieger Institute and request training. It's a one-year training, but they can also get you started with access to the testing and interpretation of the testing as well. So the name of the test is Body Bio Red Blood Cell Essential Fatty Acids. So if you look at Kennedy Krieger Institute and kind of Google that will come up for you. Yeah. Great
okay.
test.
Wow. Yeah, this is great, and I wonder how many shoemaker practitioners are aware of this test.
I don't know how many. Yeah.
Right, and I mean, it seems to me very clear. I mean, and lipid treatment has always been a core component of CIRS treatment, sort of in the background at different stages. But I feel like, me personally, I'm understanding and appreciating more and more the role, the nuance of this. And I mean, you were one of the people when we had the conversation that sort of even pushed me further down that line, because one of the things that this treatment, we can talk about this, one of the things phospholipid treatment is doing is sort of creating, right, the foundation for whatever treatment you're doing that's getting you back into normal, quote unquote. This is going to sort of serve as a long-term investment to build or to maintain that resilience at the cellular level to ongoing threats from the environment. And I love that you brought up the idea of cell danger response. We've talked about this. It's becoming more popular now. So you seem to have come across it at a time where it was relatively new. I know Robert Navio's work, it's been, I mean, he's been working for a while. He's the professor at UC San Diego who's been doing the bulk of the research on this idea of cell danger response. And it's a nice unifying concept that integrates a possible causal model of different kinds of chronic illness, going from, anything from infections to cancer to chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And so you were at, you came into this at a point where I think it was still very new, and it's now just starting to pick up. And I'm really curious to see, where do we start taking this type of knowledge and treatment moving forward with different chronic illnesses. And certainly CIRS would be, it's a great candidate to sort of look into this. So going back to your journey, so can you tell me a little bit more about, like, what did you do exactly with phosphatidylcholine treatment, and what did that look like, and what was the outcome?
Absolutely. It's like my favorite topic on earth. I'm so passionate about it. So I started, again, this was in 2016. It was still I was kind of a guinea pig, right? I kind of put myself out there. It was still new to my doctor and to me, and to, honestly, the chronic illness world. So yes, I began with the Body Bio Phosphatidylcholine complex, which I mentioned has 4 different types of phospholipids in it, all very critical to healing. And I began literally taking 4 capsules a day of this. I would just take it with protein, which was very important to do. Then I also began what's called body bio balance oil, which I mentioned, the essential fatty acids. So the 2 main pairing oils that you absolutely need. Again, you're stitching the oils that you consume into your cell integrity, which gives you the ability to detoxify and you know, have that cellular membrane be beautiful, that bad things go out, good things come in, as a very rudimentary explanation. So I started taking probably about 4 caps of those a day, and I was hit immediately with a very mild detoxification. Nothing horrible, but I thought, oh gosh, something's moving. And I realized at the time that the research was showing that, you know, one of the greatest things that keeps us so sick is enterohepatic issues, right? Our liver is not producing enough bile. Our gut is not being washed out like the waves of the ocean. Everything is stagnant in our microbiome. The gut-brain microbiome is compromised. The body cannot detoxify, and we are literally like human Velcro. Everything that we breathe and eat that's not good gets stuck inside of us. And so, like, why can't I detoxify? Or why is it cholesterol working for me? It's your cellular integrity. So once I started taking these, I slowly ramped up. I think at the time, I was taking 8 capsules twice a day of the Body Bio PC and 8 of the Body Bio Balance Oil. And then I added in another Body Bio product. And again, I do not work for Body Bio. They just have really saved my life. I want to put that out there. People are like, oh, you must work for Body Bio. I don't. They're just fantastic. I started taking calcium magnesium butyrate. And what that was just phenomenal. That took the healing to a whole other level for me. At the time, what that did was essentially, it was eating up all of the toxicity on itself, and it was detoxifying the ammonia in the brain. And it was repopulating my gut biome, even though I never took a probiotic in the entire course of my therapy. That alone was able to, the butyrate alone was able to help facilitate the regeneration of beneficial bacteria in the gut. So these 3 together, I started on an oral protocol. I drastically changed my diet. Every single toxic seed oil came out. The only oils I was left on were cold pressed olive oil that had to be very carefully sourced. And then I was also on coconut oil. I didn't cook with oils. I used saturated fat. I would apply these oils to food once they're cooked only. Would come out at room temperature. A strictly organic diet. I was very careful where I sourced my meat. That was very important to the recovery. Also was having high protein in the diet. So all of that combined, and then later I introduced intravenous infusions of the phosphatidylcholine, glutathione pushes, folinic acid combination with the B complex, and then later phenylbutyrate, which was the oral butyrate version, or infusion version of the oral butyrate. And that really did phenomenal things for me. So what I found, I did about 36 infusions, but I was also severely compromised. I wouldn't say that everyone has to do that, but I was. And what I saw in my testing, my red blood cell body bio test, was massive healing. I felt it in the body, but it was phenomenal to watch the biochemistry shift. So I was able to tolerate detoxification protocols in the Shoemaker protocol that I couldn't previously. It was almost as if the cells had restored themselves to say, oh, you want to get rid of mold? Okay, great, where our cells are able to do that. My body went from every cell being almost like a shrunken house with the roof caving in. You couldn't even open the door to let air in, to suddenly having a completely restructured foundation. When new windows, new door, things could come in and out of my metaphoric home, I guess you could say. And everything that you think, well, I tried that before, it didn't work for me. It suddenly started working for me. So I would what saved my life, and I think that I've seen in so many patients in the clinic, if something is not working for you, if a standard protocol, Shoemaker's brilliant, if it's Lyme, if it's a heavy metal protocol, if it's taking vitamin C, I mean, all these different things that you're trying or does no impact on me, it's because your mitochondria and cells themselves are not able to take them in. They're stagnant and stuck. So for me, beginning even at the cellular level was life-saving.
Right. Yes. And so, well, I have a couple questions on everything that you said, which is amazing. But one of the things I want to point out of what you said is you obviously are using your body as a guiding tool to figure out, am I feeling better? But you also mentioned the importance of using biomarkers, because it's really important, you know, when we're doing any kind of treatment longitudinally, to have as much data points as we can, because sometimes how we feel doesn't necessarily reflect the trajectories, and eventually they should converge. And it's really important to get that confirmation, because there could be times where, you know, you might feel better, but it might not be indicative of biomarkers normalizing, and that's something important to
Absolutely
to make note of. One question I have is, so we haven't talked about any of the CIRS biomarkers at this point. So I'm guessing you were doing the blood markers, that, you know, the MSH and all this. What was that looking like at this point?
Oh, well, when I started, I think we'll do a before and after. So when I started and did the TGF-beta-1, this was in 2016, I think I had the highest TGF-beta-1 my doctor had ever seen. It was 25,000.
Wow.
Brain on fire. He was like, how are you walking around? You know, how is this happening? The C4A came in, I believe it was, originally it was 8,000, so it wasn't horrible, but it showed that I was, you know, actively in mold. The MSH, I think, was 27. It should be 35. So the MSH wasn't too bad. I mean, it wasn't, you know, 0. It needs to be about 35 and higher, I believe. You know, the VIP was just absent altogether. The MSH was elevated. I think it was in the 503 range, 505 range, way too high. I think the
MMP9, you mean?
I'm sorry, that's what I meant. MP9, yeah.
MP9, okay.
MP9 elevated, showed gut inflammation. And the neuroquant, as I mentioned, came back with an absolute positive diagnosis for CIRS. So I was watching my body bio, those markers as well. It took me about 2.5 years to make a full recovery. And by full recovery, I mean that I felt like I'd never been ill before in my life. Like I led a normal life. You know, I feel fantastic. You know, I forgot the nightmare of being ill. And the body markers, what was really cool was that they went back to normal. And now I did this, and this is controversial. I did not do the VIP, the peptide treatment at the end of my treatment, but the markers did restore themselves to where they were. And I found that fascinating with the degree of the phospholipids I was on, the treatment that I was doing. It did heal my brain. I never retook the neuroquant, so I don't have a before and after metric to share. But I do find that interesting. I don't know what that means, but I think it's something worth looking at. And I know folks will say, oh, I'm on body bio. It hasn't helped me. I don't feel different. And Christian, you're absolutely right that sometimes how we feel does not mean that the work we're doing down deep is not profound and getting you well. So folks say to me all the time, Allie, I'm taking like 20 caps of PC for 2 months and feel exactly the same. And I said, you know, give it 6 months. This is not a light switch. It takes, it took us years to get them well. It's going to take a couple months to years to fully heal your cells. And you're talking about trillions of cells in your body. So testing that, having those check-ins, like looking under the hood, so to speak, with your body is motivating to say, wow, I went from negative 240 to negative 41. I'm coming back. I'm coming back to life. So keeping yourself motivated, absolutely. So yeah, the biomarkers are extremely helpful. I don't think that the CIRS biomarkers, the TGF-beta, C4A, really shift much during the treatment. I will say that it's not for me. For me, it was, I had to go really far deep down into the mitochondria, restoring my brain, really shifting my entire biochemistry for them to start shifting. That was me personally. Yeah.
So this is fascinating. I have some different, my brain's just exploding in different directions, but I'm just gonna stick with one thing. You mentioned you haven't done VIP, so you've essentially done the bulk of the other steps, and I'm just curious to hear if you're thinking about doing VIP. Do you think it's gonna move the needle in any way for you moving forward?
You know, I do. I think peptides are incredible, and I think we've all seen, I know Dr. Andy Heyman, you know, has shown us sort of the before and after. Richie Shoemaker has looked at how all those biomarkers go back to zero after peptides. So yes, that's my ultimate goal. And I know, Christian, you and I have talked though about, you know, it's important to know when to do something, and there's no There's no literature about this right now, but I know that, again, it's all anecdotal and what I see amongst other patients clinically, just in my sphere. But mold is not just mold, and there's lots of things that piggyback with it. And I think before you're going to rewire your brain, the cells themselves need to be fairly clean. Those pathways need to be open. The liver circulation and microbiome, gut-brain access needs to be open and clear. And mold, it never just comes, it comes with friends. It comes with heavy metals. It comes with industrial toxins. It comes with infection. It comes with viral loads and viral fragments. And so people say, oh, I'm a mold patient. I'm like, no, you do have that in there, but you're actually a cell membrane patient. And by that, I mean you're a mitochondrial patient, because anything that's in there, all of it needs to be addressed. The cool thing about the phospholipid treatment is that it has that hydrophilic tail, right? It will emulsify all those things that are fat soluble. Biotoxins are fat soluble, metals are fat soluble, viruses hide within all those little components in biofilm. We hear that all the time. How do I get rid of biofilm? PC for me was, it got rid of all of it. It opened it way up, opens it up, it emulsifies it and turns it into dishwash soap, it comes right out. So, you never just have mold. So my thought with the VIP is I intend to wait until those cells are squeaky clean, right? And so those peptides, because at 400, a month, I think that shot, you want to have your best shot at working. So you don't want your load to be that way. You don't want anything else carrying or sitting on your cell membrane.
I love all of this. This is very, very insightful. And I agree with you that, and it's not an easy thing to navigate as a patient, because on one end, we're trying to get better as quickly as possible. And here we have this stepwise protocol, the Shoemaker protocol, right? That if you follow it, and you get to the VIP, you should expect to have a lot of repair and recovery. But the reality is that there's all these things happening, like you say, as part of the illness and around the edges of what the protocol is meant to do. And I can personally, I'm not going to say attest to it because I'm still in the process, but one of the things that I am dealing with, and as I've gotten better with the Shoemaker protocol, certain things have become more salient in terms of getting signals from my body telling me there's something wrong here that you need to address, and it's not going to be addressed by the Shoemaker protocol itself. Right. And one of those things for me has been, I have a history of dental work. And as I've gotten better, that has become more disruptive in my life. And now I'm really thinking, before I really complete the protocol to really finalize the VIP and all of this, I may need to address this if I want to really start thinking about, going back into quote unquote normal. And so it's not an easy landscape to navigate from a patient perspective, but this is one of the qualities that I admire from you as a patient, that you've built this patience to try to really understand as much as possible of what will have profound consequences in your healing journey. And I really admire your willingness to say, I'm going to wait because I know that if I do this right, it's going to pay off. And at the same time, you're living your life, you're doing, you're doing everything that you have to do. You have a family, there's all these things. And that's, I have to say, if I heard this story when I was really sick, it would have been such an inspiration for me as a patient to see that sort of prototype of a patient being willing to do that. And my hope is that with this life, this relatively brief conversation that we have, that it will inspire others to sort of find their way to sort of integrate some of this mindset in whatever capacity they can. We're not all going to be sort of thinking about everything all the time. We all have different, personality skills and ways of coping with our chronic illnesses. But hopefully, you know, this is part of the CIRSLab also, it's kind of like a goal is to try to provide a context where despite having chronic illness and despite being patients, we can still do some expansion in terms of thinking about our healing journey and thinking about, you know, how to get better, understanding what we know medically and scientifically to work, and from there sort of, you know, expanding and going through that process. So yeah, thank you so much, Allyson. This is really, really, really amazing, and I'm sure we'll have more fun conversations. But like I said, this is going to be a great sort of source of storytelling for the people who are following the page. So really an honor to have you.
Well, thank you, Christian. And I'll just say really quickly that healing illness is not easy. And it does require the everyday patient to learn verbose words and biochemical processes enough to understand how to navigate your way. Doctors are guides, but they're not our healers. And I will say that that's hard. That's hard when you're feeling crappy to have to assume that role. And I will say, if you are interested in learning more about adding, it doesn't have to break the bank. It's not a huge financial investment. Starting looking at Body Bio PC, there's a practitioner named Justine Stinger on Instagram. She's a wonderful source of information. She's helped me tremendously find ways economically to incorporate phosphatidylcholine and the oils that we talked about, and a wonderful educational resource if you're serious about starting with your cells and working outward toward healing. So I will put that out there. It does not have to break the bank. If there's, it would be Body Bio PC. Children, be on it. All of us need to be on it. My 11-year-old daughter is on it. This is not something that you right now as a patient or as a person can go out right now and make this happen. You don't need to go to a practitioner. You don't even need to start with a test. Just start with the phosphatidylcholine complex and build from there, and build your education from there. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I know we talked about a lot of big things and like how much this is going to cost, and that sounds scary, but I would highly recommend that. Maybe, Christian, you can put some links together. I can send some resources for folks.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yes, that would be amazing. Please do, and we'll put some of these resources. And you know, and just to add to that, you know, I personally have decided to affiliate myself with Body Bio precisely for everything that you've been doing. And for me, it was a big, it did push the needle for me personally to invest in these supplements. It did take time. It wasn't something that happened, you know, within a couple of weeks. It's just that over time, I think it really helped me build some foundational resilience to some of my symptoms. And I think now, and now that I'm actually better, I even feel more the benefits of taking, you know, the phosphatidylcholine and the balance oil. And, you know, this is a reason why I've decided to affiliate myself with Body Bio, because I do believe in what they're doing and the quality of the products. And, you know, they do have sort of the scientific and medical background. They do all these testings that you mentioned. And I'm a, you know, big advocate of those kinds of resources. So thank you for pointing that out for the audience. And yes, so I think we'll stop here, but it was again great talking to you.
Thank you.
And yeah, thanks to everybody else. Yes, thanks to everybody else who joined the Instagram live, and I appreciate, you know, so hopefully this will be helpful.
Thank you, Christian. Thanks for all that you do. All right.
Yes, yeah, sure. Okay, take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.